Composers and music directors create, conduct, direct, plan, and lead instrumental and vocal performances. In this video, we're going to help you answer the question, should you become a composer or music director in 2021? We're going to go over the latest salary statistics, job market statistics, and the latest trends. Coming up. Hey everyone, Stephen Hack here with Career Watch, where I help you with your career search. If you end up enjoying the video, hit that thumbs up to support the channel. All the charts and graphs used in this video are available at my blog at the link below. Composers and music directors have a number of roles and responsibilities. They apply musical theory to create musical and tonal structures. They balance vocals, instruments, rhythms, and tempos in a performance. They study scores to learn the music in detail. They also transcribe ideas into musical notation. They attend auditions and select performers. They're also responsible for planning and scheduling rehearsals and performances. And when the show is ready, they direct groups at rehearsals and live at performances. Next, we're going to get into the compensation of composers and music directors across the United States. This data is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It is full and part-time employees. It doesn't include the self-employed. It also doesn't include overtime, bonuses, signing bonuses, commissions. This is only base salaries. By average base salary, composers and music directors do okay. In 2019, the average base salary was recorded at around $65,000 per year. And this is more than broadcast announcers and disc jockeys, but it is less than film and video editors, special effect artists and animators, writers and authors, and producers and directors. Looking at the past 2 decades, music directors and composers have seen okay wage growth from 1999 to 2019. In 1999, the average base salary for music directors and composers was around $35,000 per year. This rose to $65,000 in 2019. This gives us a wage growth from 1999 to 2019 of about $30,000. And over the years, the average yearly wage growth from that number over those 2 decades would be about $1,500 per year. If we were to apply this average yearly wage growth into the future, the average base salary in 2021 would be around $68,000 per year, and by 2029 it would rise to around $80,000 per year. Of course, these salaries are very different depending on a number of different variables. A composer or music director that doesn't have a lot of experience would earn probably around $23,000 a year as a base salary across the country. This is the 10th percentile, whereas a composer or music director in the top 10%, someone that lives in a hot job market, someone that has lots of experience, they earn more than $125,000 per year. So the compensation of music directors and composers depends on a couple different factors. One of these factors is geography. Certain states tend to pay composers and music directors more than others. In this map, the beige-colored states have no data at all associated with them. The darker blue states tend to have higher salaries. In 2019, the highest paying state for composers and music directors was the state of Hawaii, with an average base salary of around $80,000 per year, whereas the lowest paying state for this occupation was the state of Montana, where the average base salary was around $29,000 per year. It is kind of weird that Hawaii is the highest paying. In certain occupations, Hawaii is actually the lowest paying occupation. So Hawaii always kind of throws me for a loop. Other high paying states for this occupation include Idaho, Florida, the state of New York, Maryland, DC, which isn't a state, and the state of California. Another variable that goes into the compensation of people in this occupation is work environment. Performing art companies tend to pay people in this occupation the greatest amount of money, whereas religious, grant-making, civic, and professional organizations tend to pay quite a bit less, than almost $14,000 less. Next, let's take a look at the job market, and let's start off by looking at the number of job postings across the country for music directors and composers. Now, people working in this occupation can have a number of different job titles, so we're going to use a couple of them. Okay, so I'm on Indeed.com. I'm looking for job postings for music directors and composers. We'll start with music director, where music director is found in the title of the job posting. It gives us about 119 job postings. For composer, let's take a look. About 3 jobs. Choir director, There we go. About 24 jobs. Music producer. About 5 jobs across the United States. And finally, songwriter. How many jobs have songwriter in the title? About 2 jobs across the United States. So if we were to add all those job postings from Indeed.com that I just showed you, it would come to about 151 job postings for this occupation across the country. We can then compare this with the number of full and part-time employed music directors and composers, which came out to about 10,500 in 2019. This gives us 1 job opening on Indeed.com per 70 employed composers and music directors. This means this is an extremely competitive occupation. There is not a lot of jobs to go around. It's extremely hard to get into, and there's quite a few other occupations that have way more job postings given the number of employed in their respective occupations. Another thing to keep in mind with this occupation is that it is a tiny workforce. Like I said earlier, there's only about 10,500 employed composers and music directors. This is less than broadcast announcers and disc jockeys. There's far more film and video editors, special effects artists and animators, writers and authors, and there's a lot more producers and directors. What this means is that you often have to move across state lines to go after certain jobs because it is such a tiny workforce. And unfortunately for music directors and composers, things are not looking up. In 1999, the government recorded 6,310 employed music directors and composers. This hit a high of 25,290 in 2011. Since 2011, every single year, there has been less employed music directors and composers. Every year there has been job losses. And recently in 2019, the government recorded 10,580 employed music directors and composers across the United States. This kind of shows that this is an extremely competitive occupation, and it might become even more competitive if there continues to be job losses across the country. The government is also not that optimistic about future job growth in this occupation. They're predicting a 2% growth in the number of composers and musical directors over the next 10 years. So by 2029, there would be around 10,800 employed music directors and composers. And these jobs are not evenly distributed across the country. Most of these jobs are in the state of New York, probably specifically New York City. In 2019, there were 2,500 employed music directors and composers in the state of New York, and the next highest was California with 870 jobs. Other states with a higher than average number of jobs include Texas, Oregon, Florida, Pennsylvania, and the state of Ohio. So up to this point, we've talked about employed music directors and composers. There are actually quite a few self-employed music directors and composers across the country. In fact, the government found 28% of music directors and composers are self-employed. They don't track the incomes or how many hours they work per week, or if it's a 1099 contractor or they own their own firm. All we know is that a little over one out of every four music director and composer is self-employed. So let's say you're interested in this occupation. How do you determine if it's for you? Well, there's 2 different things that you could do to determine if this occupation is for you. And one of them, the first one, is to take a RIASEC assessment. A RIASEC assessment is an interest inventory. You get asked a bunch of questions about your interests, and the assessment will take these answers and you'll get scores in 6 different domains. When music directors take a RIASEC assessment, they tend to score high in the artistic and enterprising themes. This definitely makes a lot of sense. It definitely requires a lot of creativity to do this occupation. People that score high in the artistic theme love self-expression, and they tend to be extremely creative people. People that score high in the enterprising theme, they tend to be a little bit more ambitious, competitive, assertive, energetic, and they are persuasive, and they enjoy selling and leading other people. So this makes a lot of sense. A lot of music directors score really high in these 2 different themes. So if you take a RIASEC assessment and you also score high in both these themes, this occupation might be compatible with your interests. Another factor to look at is the personalities of music directors and see if that factor aligns with your personality. The go-to personality test for careers across the country is the Myers-Briggs personality test. There's a lot of free ones online. You would think personality types would be evenly distributed across the country, but as this chart shows, they are definitely not. The most common Myers-Briggs personality type found across the United States is the ISFJ personality type, and the most uncommon one is the INFJ. The Myers-Briggs types most likely to become music directors are actually the rarest type, the INFJ, also known as the advocate. And there's quite a few of these personality types that find their way to become music directors. Other Myers-Briggs type that become music directors, that tend to become music directors, include ENTJ, which is also known as the commander, ENFJ, which is also known as the giver, and INTJ, which is known as the architect. So as you can see, there are pros and cons to becoming a composer or a music director in 2021. Like with many artistic occupations, many of them are very hard to get into, but many people find a lot of meaning in them once they actually get a job. There has been okay wage growth for composers and music directors over the past 2 decades. The average yearly wage growth has been around $1,500. But overall, the most challenging aspect of this occupation is the job market. There just aren't very many job postings across the United States. When I did a search on Indeed, I only found about 151 job postings across the country. So it can be extremely challenging finding a job in this occupation. Another thing to keep in mind is there's a very high level of entrepreneurship in this occupation. Are you a composer or music director? What do you enjoy about this occupation and what do you dislike about this occupation? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.